Hello, everyone. This past Sunday, Agitation Rising was live at an event titled Waiting to Exhale. It was organized by the NAACP of Bloomington-Normal, Not in Our Town, and Moms Demand Action. It was held at the George Floyd Mural in Bloomington, which is on the corner of Allin and Washington on the west side, and it was painted by Bruce Clark, a local artist. This event was organized to remember George Floyd, but also to celebrate the conviction of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauven, one of the 4 police officers involved in Floyd's murder. The other 3, Alexander Kung, Thomas Lane, and Tu Tao, are scheduled to be tried together in August. At the event Sunday, multiple Black Zoomers, members of the NAACP Youth Council, spoke and shared their poetry and how they feel about the current situation around Black liberation. These included Bradley Jackson, Kenna Brooks, Jasmine Jordan, Anaya Thompson, and Justin Turner. I've had the chance to march with many of them, and both Anaya and Justin performed at the Black Liberation Celebration last year. Olivia Butts of BLM Blono also spoke, and so did Normal Mayor Chris Coos. But the main reason I wanted to make this video is because there were quite a few police officers in attendance. Now, they weren't there to harass or surveil us, they were there to be a part of the community event. Normal Police Chief Rick Bleichner was there, Interim Bloomington Police Chief Greg Scott was there. There were some sheriff's deputies and ISU police, and even an officer with the McLean County State's Attorney's Office. Now, this isn't that surprising for an NAACP event. They frequently invite police to their events. They were invited to the really big event last year on May 31st at the Law and Injustice Center. The NAACP did another event on June 8th where police were invited. And the NAACP has said they believe the best way to address systemic racism in policing is to bring police to the table, make sure collaboration is occurring, and the NAACP in Illinois has worked with law enforcement to create a number of reformist solutions that both sides can agree on. At the event this past Sunday, the local chapter president, Linda Foster, said at the event that she pointed out how some communities, like Minneapolis, don't have what we have. Specifically, we have law enforcement that are willing to come to these types of events and that are willing to have dialogue about these issues. Now, since the death of George Floyd, we've heard a couple of specific things from local police. One, the murder of George Floyd was unjust. It was wrong. And they, as police officers, repudiate the type of policing that was on display. And 2, there is a divide between police and communities of color. Last year, June 16th, MPD Chief Bleichner organized a short walk on the sidewalk through Uptown Normal, protesting police brutality. But again, they are specifically referring to the incident with George Floyd and are not really talking about the systemic issues that exist within policing. So towards the end of the event that occurred on Sunday at the George Floyd Mural, one of the organizers encouraged the police officers present to meet in the middle of the street and elbow bump with primarily the Black Zoomers that had performed. And why did they do this? Well, they wanted the police to signal to the people, many of whom had just spoken passionately of their own legitimate fears of police, that the police recognize that Black people exist, that they should be respected equally, and that their lives matter. On the other side, it's signaling to police that the people who fear the police recognize that not all police are bad, that policing is a difficult job, and so on and so forth. And Linda Foster said, quote, "Wasn't that a beautiful sight? We're not going to let what's happened in other places happen here. We're too good for that," unquote. So during this elbow bumping, I did go up to the mic because I wanted to remind people just how far apart the people actually are from the police and what we believe is necessary to address these systemic changes. Unfortunately, I wasn't recording when I went up and did this, but I did repeat myself later in one of my live streams. So as you can see, there are several officers here at the George Floyd Memorial. I do just want to remind people that none of these officers support getting rid of qualified immunity. None of these officers support ending the racist war on drugs. None of these officers support civilian review of police. None of these officers support reasonable limitations on police unions so that police aren't not being held accountable. So policy is definitely more important than performance, and I think that is definitely something that we all need to keep in mind. So believing that George Floyd's murder was unjust is extremely low-hanging fruit. It doesn't take much effort to take the fruit off the branch, and because it doesn't take much effort, de facto, it doesn't have much impact. This is true of elbow bump with a cop, cookie with a cop, ice cream with a cop, basketball with a cop, etc. These are all really easy to do, and they might make us feel good kind of in that moment, but they tend to not have a huge impact. If the police who were present at this event Sunday actually want to build relationships with working people, with disabled people, with people suffering mental illness, or job insecurity, then they need to be willing to do the hard things like say, maybe we don't need qualified immunity anymore. Let's go ahead and have some civilian review to increase transparency. We want to get rid of cash bail. We want to end the racist war on drugs. We're willing to accept reasonable limitations on police unions and more. I interviewed Chief Bleichner last year, and he opposed most of the policy proposals I just listed. So if the police are saying that they agree with us, there needs to be change in order to build trust in the community. We need to remember that they still oppose removing the many barriers that inhibit transparency and accountability, and they oppose investing in alternative first responders to reduce the threat of state violence towards the people. Bradley Jackson's poem actually brings up a good point.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bradley Ross Jackson. I created this poem when the George Floyd trial first started. The talk. Straight A's decorated my report card as I envisioned my mom smiling from ear to ear. Yes, life is but a dream, and I was living the dream. Until the sirens started to scream, and the red lights, they began to beam. Yes, sir? No, sir. May I slowly reach for my insurance card, sir? Why did they attempt to strip away my dignity with intimidation, discrimination, and humiliation? It's all a ball of confusion, and I am up to bat, and I am batting 1,000 with my education, articulation, and optimization.
Come on, Bradley. Come on, Bradley.
Even so, the combo must occur because unfair exemption does not offer people who look like me sweet redemption. Sir, you stopped me and ran my license plates too, simply because I'm driving a luxury car that looks brand new. Those who are not kissed by the sun do not have to endure this madness. No, not one. Sir, you stopped me and ran my license plates too, simply because I'm driving a luxury car that looks brand new. Addressing the police asked, sir, was not my way of selling out, but it was my creative way of surviving and removing all doubt. Staring through the windshield, thinking, sir, S-I-R must mean, surely it's racism. Images of 9 minutes and 29 seconds dance throughout my head. My peeps are depending on me, and they cannot find me dead. You see, the talk was not about the birds and the bees. Instead, my talk was about the police officers' knees. Thank you.
Now, Jackson is talking about being pulled over in a traffic incident, driving while black. There is a correlation of black people being stopped and having their vehicles searched at disproportionately higher rates than people of a Caucasian persuasion. This is true of all the police departments in Blono and throughout Illinois. Now, this is just a correlation, right? It doesn't take into account other factors that might get you pulled over, like criminal history, driving record, and so on. It's not saying that the primary reason more black people are stopped and searched is explicitly because of their race. What this disproportionately higher stop and search rate implies is that there are implicit or unconscious racial reasons that this occurs. What is also important to remember is that in general, many black people feel they have experienced being stopped primarily because they are black. This is an experience that crosses gender lines, crosses class lines, your economic status, crosses education, politics, and even whether you have a criminal record or not. Former U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder had this occur to him when he was a lowly assistant attorney general. Tim Scott, the current South Carolina Republican senator, has also complained about this. So this is a very common experience for many people of color. And what Jackson is really trying to get at here is the police practice of pretext stops. Now, pretext stops are when officers come up with a pretense for stopping an individual for the explicit purpose of detaining the driver and then investigating them for a non-traffic related offense. So, an officer may say that a driver didn't stop at a stop sign long enough, or they improperly changed lanes, drove erratically for like a second, very subjective determinations. But while you're detained, they may try to search your vehicle looking for drugs or whatever. Now, pretext stops are ostensibly race neutral. There's no statute saying police should be using these more on people of color than people of no color. But it just so happens that people of color are on average more likely to be stopped. And it is also true that people of color are less likely to have contraband on them than people of no color, meaning that during these stops, their time is being wasted. All right, the police are therefore detaining these people unjustly or for far longer than is necessary to resolve whatever situation occurred. So, do the elbow-bumping officers who just heard this kid complain about pretext stops that are more likely to affect him think we should get rid of pretext stops? Maybe curb their use? I doubt it, because we haven't heard them say anything. So I just wanted to make this because when we see the police officers at these events and we listen to the rhetoric they deliver, we have to be cognizant of what are their policy positions. Changes in policy are more important and more impactful than changes in performance. Actions speak louder than words, and policy speaks louder than gestures. And before I end, I just want to be clear, I'm not critiquing the NAACP or this event. I have a lot of respect for many of the people that were there, especially the young activists that performed, many of whom I've personally marched with. I thought it was a great event. The performers were great. It was for a good cause. I liked that it was nearby my house, etc. And I think it was Dr. Jackson who came up to me afterwards and said she agrees we need to have these policy discussions. So this isn't me trying to diss any of the orgs involved. I just want to make that clear. Thank you all so much for watching this video and the earlier live streams. Like the Agitation Rising Facebook page and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out my blog, Strange Corners of Thought, and support this work on Patreon. I will see you later. Love and liberation.